Welcome, everybody. Today we're having a discussion on commodities trade surveillance and compliance, in particular looking in the energy trading sector. I'm joined today by Matthew Hunter, an expert in this field. I'm sure many of you on this webinar will be more than familiar with Matthew, but maybe Matthew, for those who haven't met you, you could give us a brief introduction. I should introduce myself as well. My name is Mark Feeley. I'm the Global Brand Director for Chartis Research. Matthew, over to you.
Terrific, Mark. So brief introduction, but I don't know that I can really do that, so I'll do it really fast. Most people from the industry, if they know me at all, know me when I was the Deputy Director of Surveillance for the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. And they probably know me from an interaction that would make me more than mildly unpopular. I was head of surveillance, and I asked very invasive questions of market participants who traded futures and swaps. And aside from that, I have an energy experience as a subject matter expert, building surveillance at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And before that, I was a trader of energy products and precious metals foreign exchange for approximately 30 years.
So excellent. Thank you. Thanks for the potted history, and I think it establishes to everybody where we're going with the conversation as we look at the supervisory and the regulatory requirements that we're seeing out there. Just think to start off, if you look at sort of 2023 and basing it off, the CFTC's enforcement actions that we've seen on commodities firms and compliance stuff in the year, what do we think is the single priority that's coming out of that?
So I think that there are two. One is very popular today, and there's actually, I call it a smallish event announced today, where a penalty against Interactive Brokers for unauthorized communications. And we've seen over the past year a significant number of those actions brought by the CFTC and some by the SEC, and potentially we'll see it from other agencies. But for me, the single most important action was a very small one, and that was the penalty brought by CFTC against BBL. And that was for against the compliance staff for not providing sufficient training. And that's new. And that's new. And I think that because at the central core of every investigative activity by the CFTC and others is that they look at the compliance programs. Mm-hmm. So to hold the compliance staff as responsible and the cause of penalty for not providing trading, I think was major.
It's interesting. So it's in some ways a sort of a shift in focus. We always worry about the sort of, it's the traders themselves or whatever. And we're actually saying that maybe the enforcement staff are looking at the actual program, the compliance program when they're investigating this. Is that kind of where we're going?
Definitely there. I having worked at both at two agencies and spoken with any number of others, I know in every instance that the compliance program is something that is reviewed. But generally speaking, and the BBL case, particularly stated that the training for disruptive trading was not provided sufficiently. Mm-hmm. That's new. Generally, you would say that it's a prohibited activity, and that would be sufficient. Here it's saying, no, you didn't go into enough depth. So I think that's a very significant departure.
It is. It sounds like the sort of the funding, if you like, or the where we need to start focusing and spending is that shift into the program itself and the training and, as you say, the depth and the. Yeah. So do you have any examples of the kind of things that are looking at? I know spoofing is one that comes to mind, but
spoofing comes to mind immediately. Right. Spoofing is, as an example, is essentially one sentence in the rules and regulations. The intent not to trade is prohibited. The problem with spoofing, with spoofing is that the assumption is that every order is placed essentially with the intent to trade on its face. So if you say, buy 5 futures contracts at a price, that you mean to be firmly held to that. The vast majority of orders, and I know this from my work in surveillance, are contingent. They're not absolute. I want to buy this or I want to sell this. It's I want to buy this if, or I want to sell this if. So what is spoofing? The simplest scenario for spoofing is simply you don't intend to trade, you put in a layer of orders. So as an example, you buy 5, buy 50, buy 100, buy 500, and you put that into the market to sell to. That's pretty, but that's pretty clear. But what about if you want to spoof to deal in the dealer market or in the OTC or to deal in swap markets and you're trying to send signals? Is that scenario built into the program? That's different and much more involved to do. And then you could say, well, what if it's an intercommodity spoof? And what if it's a interjurisdictional spoof? You're sending signals from, as an example, from the futures in the S&P 500 back to the underlying stocks.
Gotcha.
Did you put that in your compliance training?
So it's coming down to rather than just you're not just spoofing, but what's the scenario that you're up to, and is that
what is the scenario? And so we can go to benchmark manipulation. You know, how do you? What does it mean to benchmark manipulate? You have to put the examples of what it is, rather than saying you're prohibited from benchmark manipulation. It's much more intense and much more. I'm going to say the detection of spoofing or the detection of benchmark manipulation it is almost secondary at some level to the prohibition and the scenario identification by the compliance teams. That's different.
I was just thinking that it sounds like the compliance staff now need to know an awful lot about actual trading and scenarios, right? Not just rules. And it sounds like a bit of a dilemma. I mean, if you were to look at what is the dilemma that is facing the compliance teams, what is it? I mean, it sounds horrendous.
Yes. So not to lose myself again.
Yep.
The task of compliance is impossible. You know, it's the word that I like to use when I pronounce it correctly is Sisyphean, the Sisyphus issue, which is you think, and this is true for government too. It's the exact same thing, right? In the surveillance teams. So if a firm is completely compliant and they spend all of this money on compliance protocols and staff and whatnot, but you'll never discover anything because literally you're compliant. It looks like an entire waste of money, right? Because look, you spend all this money and there's no result. On the other hand, if you find something, that's a worse problem. No one wants to be told that they're in potential violation of spoofing or benchmark manipulation, because that brings a series of other problems that management just doesn't want. So the dilemma is, I think, is pretty significant to provide training, to have systems in place to identify potential illegal conduct, and then if you're compliant, what does that look like, right? That just looks like a waste.
It's interesting. We've seen it in the banking market. You move from this question of what's the cost of compliance to what's the cost of non-compliance, and then eventually you get to the cost of over-compliance.
Yes, absolutely true. And I've been talking to people about this for a very long time. And when I was asked, how do you do this? He said, well, your compliance people have to literally know as much as the traders. So you're going to need someone with a trading background on the compliance team, but compliance doesn't pay like trading does. So there's a tension in that.
So to sort of wrap it all together, we've been talking through the issues around people need to be trained, we need to understand the scenarios. There's a whole question about what is the task. If you were to sort of summarize our discussion today as a closing observation, what should compliance and trade surveillance teams be thinking?
Doing the right thing is not a simple cost analysis. Legal compliance is a little different than just ethical compliance. You should not be doing activities that are not only potentially violative, but are clearly against the best interest of market integrity for the market participants themselves, as well as the perspective of the regulator. And the responsibility to participate in markets sits on the compliance team's shoulders. So that at the end of the day, senior management, which always says they want to be compliant, they all do, and no one is going to say, yes, I really want to make some extra money by benchmark manipulation. Nobody thinks like that. But the actual enforcement of we will be good citizenry has a cost that shouldn't be looked at simply as, oh, that money could be in my pocket. It is, to be a responsible citizen, you have to pay taxes, and this is part of it. And it should be, I won't say celebrated, but it shouldn't be denigrated either to say, oh, we just don't want to do this. So I'm a big believer in integrity. First, you tell the truth, you do the honorable thing, and that's where compliance sits. And so I think it's important.
Well, that's excellent, Matthew. Thanks for the time today. It's really been a bit of an eye-opener for me, as you think, because I used to run some of the compliance systems, and it used to be that old issue of, well, it's a cost, it's tax. Well, tax, and it's an interesting thinking around the fact that tax actually funds benefit, and so there is a benefit in this, right? And I think it's interesting times ahead as we see. It sounds to me like there'll be a lot of upskilling going on in compliance teams. Does it need to really understand the business, which is something, it sounds like mother had an apple pie, right? Yeah, you should understand the business you're regulating. Yes. Well,
and I would argue that on the other side, that the regulators and the enforcement teams should understand the business that they regulate, rather than say, I understand the law. Laws many times conflict with, to some degree, with the physics of the world. And something has to be repaired. You can't just say, please, tide don't rise, because I don't want it. He said, the tide is going to rise. So
it is.
Both sides need to understand commercial activity, legitimate activity, and what is designed to be a fraud, and not just say because the footprint is X, it's a fraud.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Matthew. I've really enjoyed talking to you today. I'm sure the audience would have lots of questions, which we can route through yourself or through Chartis as well. And have a good rest of your day.
And to you, sir.